po si Maria Lourdes B. Bueno, Education Program Supervisor ng Science. Nakasuporta sa Radyo Eskwela sa Isabela.
Communication Hub and Literary Arts Center of SDO Isabela. SDO English Academy.
An analogy describes the relationship between words.
Subject, verb, or teacher.
One hand. English Academy.
Hello grade 7 listeners, how are you? Are you feeling great today? That's awesome! I feel great too. As we face the summer vibes, I want to greet you a bright day. Welcome to another episode of English for grade 7 only here in English Academy. I am a radio teacher for today, Teacher Terence Crisadaliano. As we start our lesson, I'd like you to prepare your pen and notebook. Find a comfortable location and focus on listening to our discussion. Are you all set? That's great. Now, let's have a game that will measure your knowledge about our national hero. Let's call this game Sana All Rizal. Here is the mechanics of the game. I will give you some information about Jose Rizal and you will determine if it's accurate or not. If the information pertains to Jose Rizal, just say, "Ikaw na." But if you doubt that the information is about Jose Rizal, just say, "Ikaw ba?" So, are you ready?
All right!
That's good. Let's have the first information. Jose Rizal authored the novel entitled Noli Me Tangere. I repeat, Jose Rizal authored the novel entitled Noli Me Tangere. What's your answer? That's correct. Jose Rizal is the author of the famous novel Noli Me Tangere. Let's have number 2. Jose Rizal is a cardiologist or doctor of heart. Jose Rizal is a cardiologist or doctor of heart. Ikaw na or ikaw ba? You got it! Jose Rizal is a doctor but not of the heart, but of eyes or known as ophthalmologist. Let's proceed to number 3. Jose Rizal was exiled in Dapitan. Jose Rizal was exiled in Dapitan. Ikaw na or ikaw ba? That's correct! Jose Rizal was exiled in Dapitan, Zamboanga del Norte in Mindanao from 1892 to 1896. What about this information? Jose Rizal is a terrific sculptor. I repeat, Jose Rizal is a terrific sculptor. What's your answer? This is correct. In fact, Jose Rizal sculpted a figurine named El Ermitano, which he gifted to a priest. Now, let's have the 5th one. Jose Rizal is a tall man. I repeat, Jose Rizal is a tall man. Ikaw na or ikaw ba? It is safe to say that Jose Rizal is not a tall man. In fact, his height is 5 feet and 3 inches only. He might be a small man, yet he has done a big change and fight for the country. How many correct answers did you get? Alright!
Very good!
I know that you're excited to learn more about him. And for today's episode, you are lucky enough because you will get to know more about him. By the way, I have mentioned about Rizal's exile in Dapitan a while back. Do you know why he was displaced in Dapitan? When Jose Rizal was at Manila, he was sensational among his countrymen and that feared the Spaniards and exiled him in Dapitan. The Spanish authorities arrested him for publishing anti-Catholic books and criticizing the Spanish rule. While he was in Dapitan, he was able to develop himself and became even more fruitful. He was able to maximize his skills and talents as a physician, engineer, educator, agriculturist, businessman, inventor, artist, linguist, scientist, and a civic worker. That's simply amazing, right? Our lesson today is centered in the life of Jose Rizal in Dapitan. This is a short story entitled Man in Dapitan, written by the Philippine author Loreto Paras Sulit. I will share to you the summary of the selection. I want you to listen carefully and write in your notes some important details. But before listening to the story, please prepare your pen and paper and write in it the following guide questions. Number 1. What are the portrayed skills of Jose Rizal in the story? I repeat, what are the portrayed skills of Jose Rizal in the story? Are you done writing it? Alright, let's have the second question. How were the people in Dapitan benefited on Rizal's exile in their place? Again, how were the people in Dapitan benefited on Rizal's exile in their place? For the last question, if you were Lope and his father, would you trust Jose Rizal to operate your mother's eyes? If you were Lope and his father, would you trust Jose Rizal to operate your mother's eyes? That's good. Now, I'll read the summary of the story. Listen carefully, take note of the important details based on the guide questions, and try to understand the message that the story conveys. Are you ready?
All right.
Okay. Man in Dapitan. One day, 3 boys named Lope, Hugo, and Felix were arguing about the right answer to a question they have in their lesson in catechism. As they were shouting with loud and angry voices and were about to engage in a fist fight, a man in a kind voice interrupted and told them that a fist fight may prove who is the strongest among them, but not who is right. He told them that if they really want to find out who is right, then they should open their books and read the answer very well. Perplexed yet obedient, the boys did as the man said and found out the right answer. They also recognized that the man who spoke to them was someone who just arrived in their town, Dapitan. Since then, the man became friendly to the boys, and the boys also were curious to befriend and know more about the man. One day, Lope offered some ripe mangosteens to the man, and as the man accepted, he asked the boys if they want to learn a new language. He offered to teach them English, and they all agreed. One day, as they were having their English class, the man noticed Lope as if there was something bothering him. Lope expressed his grief for his mother, who has an eye condition and is almost blind. Lope said that they couldn't afford to take her to the doctor for an operation because they are poor. The man then offered to help Lope by visiting their house and have a check on his mother's eyes. Upon arriving at Lope's house, Lope's father and the man had a private talk. Then, the man diagnosed that Lope's mother's eyes need only a simple operation, and that he could do for her. The operation was successful, and Lopez's mother can now see very clearly. Lopez's father was very grateful to the man, and as he expressed his gratitude, he demanded to know the name of the man. The man then introduced himself as Jose Rizal.
Okay, I will read the story for the second time around. Please listen carefully, and here we go.
Man in the Pitan. One day, 3 boys named Lope, Hugo, and Felix were arguing about the right answer to a question they have in their lesson in catechism. As they were shouting with loud and angry voices and were about to engage in a fist fight, a man in a kind voice interrupted and told them that a fist fight may prove who is the strongest among them, but not who is right. He told them that if they really want to find out who is right, then they should open their books and read the answer very well. Perplexed yet obedient, the boys did as the man said and found out the right answer. They also recognized that the man who spoke to them was someone who just arrived in their town, the Pitan. Since then, the man became friendly to the boys, and the boys also were curious to befriend and know more about the man. One day, Lope offered some ripe mangosteens to the man, and as the man accepted, he asked the boys if they want to learn a new language. He offered to teach them English, and they all agreed. One day, as they were having their English class, the man noticed Lope as if there was something bothering him. Lope expressed his grief for his mother, who has an eye condition and is almost blind. Lope said that they couldn't afford to take her to the doctor for an operation because they are poor. The man then offered to help Lope by visiting their house and have a check on his mother's eyes. Upon arriving at Lope's house, Lope's father and the man had a private talk. Then, the man diagnosed that Lope's mother's eyes need only a simple operation, and that he could do for her. The operation was successful, and Lope's mother can now see very clearly. Lope's father was very grateful to the man, and as he expressed his gratitude, he demanded to know the name of the man. The man then introduced himself as Jose Rizal. Did you like the story?
Yes, sir.
Great! The story makes us recall all the good deeds Rizal had done for our country, right?
Yes.
Yes. Now, let's check your understanding of the story by answering the guide questions I gave you a while back. First, what are the portrayed skills of Jose Rizal in the story? That's correct. Jose Rizal is a notable ophthalmologist and an educator. His skills in these fields were enhanced when he was exiled in the Pitan. Let's have number 2. How were the people in the Pitan benefited from Rizal's exile in their place? Very good. He educated the children in the Pitan and treated Lopez's mother's eyes. Well, those are just few of the great things he did for that community. He also did engineering, farming, and scientific activities in the Pitan. If you want to know complete details about his life while he was in exile, you may browse the net about his life in the Pitan. And for number 3, if you were Lope and his father, will you trust Jose Rizal to operate the mother's eyes? I believe most of you will say yes. Well, that is for sure. Although Lope and his father were not aware of Cerizel's ability to diagnose and treat eye diseases, they entrusted the operation to him as his actions as stated in the first part of the story exhibit his kindness towards other people and wisdom he readily shared. So, in this short story, are the details in the story fictional or based on facts? That's right. It is based on facts because it depicts the life Rizal had when he was exiled in Dapitan. The story partly unveils few of his talents that he had shared with his fellow Filipinos, proving that fact that he was a polymath. If you were Rizal, would you also share talents God has given you? Are you going to share it with other people? Well, you should be, because sharing your talents and your passion with others means helping them achieve their goal, and in the same way, you are also helping yourself improve, right?
Yes.
Of course. So, did you understand our lesson today?
Yes, sir.
That's awesome. I believe you are now ready for a quiz. Now, please prepare your pen and paper and answer the following questions for your activity. I'll read the questions twice and you will write in your notebook the letter of the correct answer. Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Number 1. What historical period when Rizal was exiled in Dapitan? I repeat, what historical period when Rizal was exiled in Dapitan? Was it A. American occupation, B. Spanish occupation, or C. Japanese occupation, or C. Japanese occupation? Number 2. Which of the following characteristics does not portray Rizal? Which of the following characteristics does not portray Rizal? A. A kind teacher, B. A doctor for the eyes, or C. A tall athlete? Let's have number 3. What fruit was given by Lope to Rizal? What fruit was given by Lope to Rizal? Is it A. Mangosteen, B. Guava, or C. Pineapple? Number 4. How did the story start? How did the story start? A. Rizal arrived in Dapitan, B. Lope, Hugo, and Felix were about to have a fist fight, or C. Rizal invited the boys for a tutorial class? And for number 5, what do you think is Loreto Parasulit's inspiration in writing the story? What do you think is Loreto Parasulit's inspiration in writing the story? A. His inspiration in writing Man in Dapitan is Jose Rizal's historical life in exile. B. His inspiration is writing Man in Dapitan is the life of the Filipino during the American occupation in the Philippines. Or C. His inspiration in writing the story is the country's fight against the Spaniards. Did you answer all the questions? That's good. Let us now find out the correct answers. The answer in item number 1 is letter B. Number 2 is letter C. Number 3 is letter A. Number 4 is letter B. And number 5 is letter A. Did you get 5 correct answers? Wow! Great job!
Very good.
Oops! You might not have noticed, but we are about to end this episode. I hope that you learned a lot about the life of our national hero through the short story entitled Man in the Pitan. I also hope that you were able to observe how the historical period affected this story. If you were also an exile like Rizal, do you think you will be the same as Rizal or will you have a miserable life? Reserve your answer for another discussion. For now, I'd like to thank you for listening to our lesson today. On behalf of the scriptwriter, Mr. Loriano Pascua, and the SDO Isabela RBI production team, I am teacher Terence Crisareliano, your teacher for today. And Jose Rizal's last words before he died were, "Consumarum est," which means, "It is finished." I want to end this episode by saying, we may think that our journey ends by the time our lives end. Yet, look at Rizal's life. He may be gone on earth a long time ago, but he is still living not only in books, but also in our hearts. Thank you and God bless us all. Goodbye!